What's up, guys? This is CJ here, and this is going to be the patch 7.10 review. I haven't looked at this yet, and I hear that there are a couple things in here that are mildly interesting. So let's get into it. Mid-season here has been here for a patch, blah blah blah, overperforming, and the ever-anticipated Heimerdinger change. So I've heard Heisendong's notes about this as he's been talking about it the past couple of weeks. And you know he thinks it's a net positive, but we haven't seen the numbers or anything. So I like how they put a little donger in here. PogChamp. All right. Health regen to 7. Health regen growth at 5. So this looks like a big nerf, but passive speedy Hextech affinity speedy Heimerdinger. Heimerdinger gains 20% move speed when within 300 range of allied turrets or turrets he creates. So let me think about this. 300 range. So if we think about the average auto attack of an 80 carry to be something like 550, then 300 is like way less than that, right? The average auto attack range is something between 50 to like 150-ish, or maybe 175. So like you have to be relatively close to get this move speed ability, but at the same time 20% move speed, let's say you have 400 move speed with like a tier 1 boots, 20% of that is already 80 move speed, right? So if you're near your turret, within like 2 auto ranges of a turret, so within like a turret like radius of your turret, you'll definitely get 80 move speed, which is a lot of move speed. Makes his outplay potential a lot, so makes him harder to run into probably. More turrets, stack limit 3 at all ranks, so that's really strong at level 1 obviously, but this is the nerf to the level 1. Stack generation every 20 seconds, so buff. Base damage 6 to 18. So his AP ratio has increased, but the base amount of damage has decreased. And I feel like that's supplemented, right? Like if you're going to give 3 turrets at level 1, then you almost have to divide the power of those turrets by 3, right? So 12 to 6 is divided by 2. But your AP ratio is higher. So at the end, 36 to 18 is divided by 2, right? So I think that the base damage matters less in the late, right? Like at level 5Q, at level 9, 18 damage per auto, I guess it's important, but in the late, your AP ratio is just going to overtake the 18 base damage per auto 100% of the time. So the question is, how good is this nerf? Or how relevant is this nerf to divide it by 2? And I'd say that's fair given that at level 1 you have 3 turrets. So it's relatively fair. Beam damage is 40 to 130 to 40 to 120, so relatively unchanged, just a little tweaks in the late. Turrets no longer prioritize nearby enemy champions or champions that attack them. That sounds bad. Turrets no longer briefly remain active after Heimer leaves the area. That sounds bad. Nearby turrets gain 20% charge for each W rocket that hits champion, and 100% charge if E-grenade hits a champion. So what's okay, so the beam charge gets dependent on if you land your skill shots. That seems rewarding, right? Like if you're good at Heimer and you can hit your W and your E, it seems pretty rewarding. Turrets charge from 0 to 100 in 90 seconds. So the beam takes so long to charge now. So you're not, so like even though the damage is relatively the same from the beam, your beam, like, it's like 6x longer duration. So you almost have to hit your W and your E, right? For each W rockets that hits. So if you hit 5 W rockets, oh, so it makes Heimer more bursty, right? So let's say you're getting all in on, right? If you hit 5 W rockets, you're gonna get 100% charge. Beam goes off, and then if you hit the E, well, obviously you're gonna E first, right? So enemy junglers charging in on you, right? If you hit the E, you're gonna get the 100% charge, so you're gonna get 1 beam. And then because you hit the E, you're going to 100% hit 5 Ws, right? So you're going to get 2 beams, right? So it's actually better because if you get 2 beams, whereas before you would only get 1 beam because it didn't depend on this, then you're actually going to be dealing more damage because you're going to be proccing this damage twice. So I like it. It's more rewarding. Turn no longer games. You can charge for each of their basic attacks. So it can't charge on its own anymore. The beam can't actually charge on its own, but it charges based on how good you are at landing your skill shots. That's pretty sick. I like adding more skill to the game. I'm in favor of that. Sure, it's no longer spawn with a beam charge. Okay. So overall, the Q looks pretty solid. I like this change because you can have 3. I'm not so sure about this base health regen thing, because Heimer's regen before was pretty strong based on his old passive, but with this new passive and the regen nerf, I guess the argument is just that Heimer's never going to get hit enough because Heimer controls so much area, and now you can dodge so much more that you shouldn't be getting hit. Interesting. Mana cost down, so that's a buff. Cooldown down, that's a buff. Each rocket that hits the champion gets 20% beam charges, yep. Cooldown 18 to 12, so PogChamp. Radius up, PogChamp. If grenade hits a champion, PogChamp can now lob the grenade onto himself. Okay. And buff. Wow, so this looks like a huge buff for Heimer. So E is totally buffed, W is totally buffed, R is totally buffed, and the only thing that you could read as a nerf is his health regen. This minor damage in the late that you're losing, and this decrease auto from the turrets, but you justify that because you have more turrets. So if you put down 3 turrets instead of 1, then you're effectively having 18 here instead of 12 at level 1 because you can only put 1 at a time. I like it. How will Heimer do compared to the meta? Well, he's mostly ever going to be played in the mid or the top lane, right? And if that's the case, you have area control. If you can move within to make use of your passive, moving between 20% or gaining 20% move speed, you play better in like slightly more confined areas, not so wide areas. Additionally, Heimer isn't like a hyper ranged mage either, because your only real ranged ability is your E and your W. But then you're not making use of your turrets, which plays more into the top lane because you want efficiency in space, whereas in mid lane you can be a little more long range. So when Heimer competes against the top laners, Heimer's almost always going to win against the tanks, right? Like it's a non-contest. So how does he do against Kled, Jace? Against Kled, I imagine the area control is pretty solid. So long as you're saving your E properly, you can probably play 2v1s pretty well. And like if Kled walks up to auto your turrets, you auto him. Kled can't really get in range of you until level 6 anyway, because you're never going to be in range of Kled E anyway. So your level 1 to 5 against Kled is pretty strong, and then your level 6 you have to play a little bit safer, but you might be able to have some outplay potential, because even if you get hit by the R, if you land the E properly, you know, predicting Kled's movements with Kled's E, then you're going to get the hyper burst, and then once he goes melee, I think you can kill him, as long as you built like either Tabi or into Zanya's. So it looks pretty solid. And then your 2v1s against junglers look strong. So it looks pretty solid. Alright, Rammus. Rammus no longer gains 25% of his armor as AD, okay. Rammus's basic attacks deal 8 to 20%, right? 8 to 20 flat damage at levels 1 to 13, plus 10% armor. So if you think about early game, how much of his armor did he have early game, right? If you say he has like 10 armor early game, you know, effectively the 9 from Yellows, then he would get 2.580. But now that's increased to a flat 8 at level 1. So this is definitely more damage at the base. But it's less damage later on, right? Because it goes from 25 to 10%. So at some break-even point, it looks like this would have been a better stat, right? So let's say he has like 300 armor. If he has 300 armor, 10% of that is 30, right? 30 plus this 20 is 50. But what's 25% of 300, right? 25 times 3. So he would get 75. So here he would only, like if he has 300 armor, he would only have 50 damage here, but he would have 75 damage here, right? But obviously, Rammus's problem is more in the early game, right? Rammus has to survive through the early game as a tank jungler, or like a odd top tank, right? So I feel like giving him stats for the early is a lot stronger because he'll be able to control area. This will help his jungle clear in the early. it'll help his lane trades. And in the late game, let's say you have 200, right? If you have 200 armor, then, 10% of that is 20, another 20, so it'd be 40, and then it'd be 50. So it breaks even roughly at like 150 armor, something like that. Which is definitely after like 2 items. 1 item, 2 items. So pretty solid. Like, if you're gonna buff someone for the early, Rammus needs some help there. Q Powerball buff, okay. Duration down. Alright. It's kind of annoying to get chased down by Powerball. I can get that. It's now channeled effect. Maximum move speed up 150 to 235. Okay. So, duration down, but wow, this is actually a lot if you can get like the second Powerball. Because oftentimes when I see Rammus, you're gonna like Powerball into them and then it's gonna go on cooldown. But then like if you're still chasing, you can get another Powerball onto them. So it's pretty solid. Especially late 6 seconds and then from 10. Like even if you're losing 1 second here, you're gaining it in the move speed. So overall, this still looks like a buff. So this looks like a buff to the early, which is good, and this looks like a buff so far. Damage down in the late. Okay, you max W first anyway. Doesn't change too much. You're not really playing Rammus for the damage. And the slow is up, but only for 1 second. Like, I feel like an 80% slow for 1 second is a lot better anyway, because you're going to be using your taunt on them ASAP, right? So you want to hit them, and then they're going to try and get away. But the 80% slow for 1 second is more important than the 40% slow for 2 seconds, because you want to taunt them. And when you're taunting them, you want to walk back. So you don't want them to be slow when they walk into you, right? When you back up, when you E and then walk back. So this is a buff. Okay, ready slightly reduce. Okay. What? Woo! Okay. Bonus resistances. Okay, so they have to decrease the numbers, obviously. 20 flat. Okay, so it's 20 flat, and then this is per level. I meant to say you max E first anyway. For ganks. Okay. So you're not getting a bunch of free resists, which kind of sucks. Because you need to build... So this hurts his early game. Because if you were going for some W max, you would get 20 resistances every time, right? But now it's only... It's 20 to all this. And then your resistances, like... Your resistances only come after your first item. Effectively. Like 50% of your resist. That's like 5 armor. It's almost negligible. That puts this at 25 if you have armor yellows. It's really bad. This looks like it'll hurt his early game way more than the buff of his passive helps his early game. Because even if you're doing more damage, like you won't be able to survive the trade initiation. Even if it is up every 6 seconds. Like you'll be able to use this on cooldown, right? The cooldown is 6 seconds and the duration is 6 seconds. But you still have to wait till you press it again to get the cooldown to start, because you have to wait for the next defensive ball curl to come up. And he slows himself, that sucks. You can end the effect early, sure. Spike shield is amplified by 50%. So, if spike shield is amplified by 50%, then that means that this will go to 16 damage, this will go to 30 damage, this will go to 20%, or 15%. But that still doesn't... Like, this moving to 15% doesn't matter in the early game, because he doesn't have stats yet. Like, you might get, like, 4 more damage. So this will go to 12 to 30 instead. But you don't really care about that in the late, because the minimum damage is negligible in the mid-late game. Because you want to play Rammus for the defensive aspects, not the offensive aspects. Enemies that basic attack Rammus while defensive curls active take damage equal to 12 to 30 plus 15. But like here's the problem, right? Like even if you give him 12 damage, you're still taking away effectively 20 armor, right? So the amount of times you would have to auto attack to break even, like it's not even close when you compare it to 120 damage, right? Like for me to make up this 100 damage difference, I need like 100 armor so I can get 50%. So like after 1 or 2 items, the defensive ball curl will be a buff, right? Because this will be down, you'll break even with this after you have 1 or 2 items. The slow is a little bit annoying, but it's really whatever, because you're a bit taunting and moving back anyway. And like, this is like an attempt to salvage the situation, but it's gonna hurt us early so hard. Like, this hurts us early more than the passive would buff him. No longer reduces target. Gains attack speed. No. I don't like the direction they're going. Like, when you play Rammus, you pick Rammus to say, like, oh, you know, I'm going to play a defensive-oriented, you know, tank champion, right? And then they just, like, do this. Like, oh, let me give him some flat damage, and let me give him some attack speed so he can access his passive flat damage. I'm just like, but if I wanted to play a damage-oriented champion that had attack speed, I would use Lee Sin passive, right? I'm not playing Rammus to play for damage. I'm playing Rammus to play for the tankiness. And my job is to survive through the early game. So, sure, your passive helps me survive through the early game, but not if you're gutting the amount of late game that I have. I guess it's not a gut. But, like, this is hurting his early game as well. I guess this is hurting... Like, reducing their armor in the early is so much better than gaining the amount of damage that you do. Like, when you fight, you're not fighting the Lee Sin to say, I'm going to 1v on this Lee Sin. You're fighting in a 2v2 saying, alright, I'm going to taunt him, I'm going to reduce his armor so my mid lane Jace can kill him, right? And then this damage per second is down, AP damage is down. Tremor deals double damage to structures. Okay, cool. Tremor slow effects nearby champions. Subsequent tremors add additional stuff. I don't know. I don't like the direction they put him in. Like, he'll probably have less access to the jungle now than he did before, and less access to the top lane than he did before. Like, maybe you can taunt long enough to get a couple of autos off to, like, try and break even on damage. But you're not supposed to kill people in the early game. That's not what Rammus was designed for. I think this is a butcher, honestly. Okay. W damage down. That was probably going to happen at some point. AP ratio up. Okay, so this doesn't really impact too much except for minor all-ins. And even outside that, right? If you're going to decrease this by 5 every level, like, you're only really using this last... Okay, so you pretty much go for W max a high percentage of the time anyway, right? You're almost never going for the Q max. You're deciding between W max and E max. So insofar as you do W max anyway, you're not going to fight till level 3 on Fizz anyway, right? Because you want all 3 spells. So at level 3, this will still be level 1, but you're going to pick this up. You're going to pick this skill point up relatively quickly. So losing 5 damage, like, if you're using it to CS, this doesn't really matter that much, right? For if you're using this to fight, like the bleed damage, let's say you have 30 AP, right? Pretty standard, 30 AP. A third of that is 10, whereas 40% of 30 is going to be 12. So you still have plus 2 AP, right? So this will be 22 effectively, and this will be 32 effectively. So... And as you get more AP, let's say you have 100 AP. So this would be 33 AP, and this would be 40 AP. So it would be plus 7. So it would be 27, so you're already breaking even above 37. So, like, how do you make up for 25 AP? Let's say you have 300 AP. 100... Yeah, if you have 300 AP, this would be 100 damage plus. And then if you have 300 AP, that'd be 20 more damage, right? So this breaks even at roughly a little over 200 AP, roughly. And I guess outside of that, the bleed damage is less. The active damage is also going to be less, because it's the same numbers. Active damage versus marked targets. Now if you mark them, you're going to have more. Okay, so they're taking away the Fizz's earlier W damage, but they're giving it a break-even point at roughly above 300 AP. This is roughly the same. So I guess reducing the snowball potential at level 6, because Fizz was getting out of hand at level 6, used as counter picks to Syndra. Like, Syndra should be the aggressor in the matchup, not the Fizz, of course. But the level 6 all-in is going to hurt a little more. But the late is perfectly fine. So the question is, did Fizz need a nerf? And I'd say yeah. Because like, it's a risk-reward ratio, right? When you pick Fizz into Syndra or whatever, you're like, there's an inherent risk that you're putting in because you're conceding CS. but there's a risk for the Syndra as well, right? You're risking it for the all-in potential later. That occurs once, you hit level 6 and all that jazz. So I felt like it was relatively easy to snowball the game as soon as you hit 6 because you could 100 to 0 almost all the time, so long as you knew where the enemy jungler was, against any champion that doesn't build Negatron Cloak. So I feel like, or Roa. So I feel like they're just like, they want to decrease the snowball mechanic of Fizz, but the trade-off for that is helping the late a little more. And I can see how they get away or think about this change. So I feel like it's fairly warranted. Graves is kind of off the game now. Graves Q damage is down, Graves Q ratio is up, but how much AD does Graves actually build? Warrior, maybe Cleaver. Okay, so sure. The second part of Q base damage is down, and the ratio is up. So I like this change because Graves can 1v1 almost everyone early on. Like contestable lease and contestable lease, things like this. So by decreasing the ratio and increasing his late, it makes him more of a carry, like a jungle carry, like he's meant to be because he doesn't have CC, so he's supposed to farm out into strength. And it doesn't just let him walk over every other jungler like he's doing, so I think warranted. And then R cooldown increase. So yeah, I think this puts Graves in the right direction, because when you pick Graves, it's like picking Mastery, right? You want to farm into strength. You don't really want to be able to abuse everyone. Like, Graves is just a better farming Mastery, you know? Okay. Have been improved? Sure. Move speed down. Okay, this will slightly decrease his clear and whatnot. Wow. His health cost is up 8%. That's a huge nerf. It's not really that big a nerf, because if Iron gets a red, then it matches that situation anyway, or it helps it out over time. But you think about Ivan trying to do 3 camps, right? That's going to be 8% of his health 3 times. He's going to be losing 24% more of his health over the course of 3 camps, and 8% of his health every camp, right? That's a lot. Now the question is, how does this impact Ivan? It means he won't be able to do his 5th camp. He'll only be able to do 4 camps, and he has to wait a little bit longer for his red to regen his HP, or he has to use both of his pots a little earlier. The mana cost, a little bit negligible. You have to wait a little bit longer. So the question is, did Ivern need a nerf? And I'd say Ivern needed a nerf concerning his invade play, right? The fact that Ivern could invade and just take early junglers' buffs and camps with no repercussion because he's Ivern, I felt like that needed a nerf. Now, does this address that? Maybe a little bit, because now they can get punished a little bit more if they get caught. Is this the correct way of nerfing it? I'd say it's probably the only way of nerfing it. Right? You're not allowed to just go Raptors red and then move into their blue without having a higher percentage risk of dying. Does Ivern need a nerf in the macro sense? As a shielder? No, he plays his role pretty well. I feel like Ivern plays his role pretty fairly. So, seems like it's appropriate for the change. Sorry, I was just buying a stock. Haha. So it seems like it was appropriate for the change. Lee Sin, move speed down a little bit, R cooldown up. Yeah, R was really abusive. Like if you had if you have Warrior or whatever, you'd get R multiple times off in plays. You could like gank a lane and then they would base, and then if this is at 40, by the time they're back in the lane, you could gank them again. So yep, Lee Sin needed this nerf. Lulu health down, base shield down. So the problem with Lulu wasn't really with her E shield, because if you're already shielding 70 damage, you're shielding 1 auto or 2 autos, and it's effectively the same. Like in the late, when you get into mid-game team fighting, this 30 is going to be important. But overall, it's really the polymorph or the ultimate that has the most problem for Lulu's kit. I don't think this is the correct way of addressing it. E range increase. I didn't really think Casa needed a buff. No longer proxy against structures. Okay. This is negligible. Q 50 mana, so nerf at level 1. So this gives... So Maokai is only really used in top jungle and support at the moment. And support is kind of cheese because there's only one brush and you can just play around it. You can kind of use... Like, Maokai can't really push because he's a melee. So he can't really push and drag jungle pressure because even if you E the brushes in the river, like, you'll never be pushing anyway. So Maokai's more of like a jungler top laner. And in the top laner, I guess, sometimes you can find shove matchups where you can abuse E in bushes. Most of the time you're going to be E-maxing and then Q-maxing, which means that you're going to be losing 5 mana until level 7 where you skill this up at 0.2. Cooldown down, so that's cool. Knockback distance increase, so it's kind of cool. Doesn't really change the state of Maokai too much. Mana cost up, so I feel like this is important because players are just spamming this way too much. Base damage down. We see how much damage Maokai E does. But overall it's going to be 8% plus 2. So the base damage is down. So the early game damage is down. The late game damage is relatively equal when you get to level 9 to max it. Your mana cost is higher, so it's more of an issue. So our junglers going to be able to spam this, not if they get blue, but you know, you shouldn't take blue from your mid lane in higher percentage of situations. So you're going to be losing 20 mana every time as compared to right now. And I feel like that's a solid nerf. You're not really going to be building mana items. Maybe you go Runic Echoes, but like Maokai jungle is just so risky and so shitty. So solid nerf. Spam call. Solid nerf, and solid nerf. Seems like it to me. I'll take this over this any day, honestly. Like Maokai is still a sucky top laner. And if you play him in the jungle, you get abused by other junglers. If you play him in the support lane, he can't shove. So he really never makes use of E. So Maokai is just kind of a troll pick right now. Not really worth it. Bad spot. Now Q range up, okay. W damage up. E shield down. So I feel like Rakan's problem right now. So Rakan doesn't have the means. Like, Rakan plays like a melee champion without the ability to push, really. Like, you can't help in a push. You can almost only help in reverse all-ins. Or, like, ganks, maybe. But he doesn't really do much past that. The taunt is nice, but it's not great. Damn, that was weird. So I feel like the taunt... I feel like Rakan's issue is that while his shielding is fine, and I didn't think the shield nerf was necessary, I feel like Rakan's basic issue comes from not being able to exert as much pressure in the lane as a melee champion. But you look at the other melee champions like Alistar, like Braum, like Tahm Kench, they have a way of engaging, or at least a way of poking like Tahm Kench, which they can do an all-in. And Rakan's all-in is fine, but Rakan doesn't have enough damage to control his all-in, right? He doesn't contribute enough. He doesn't contribute, like, stopping the enemy damage, like, you know, when Alistar or Braum CCs them, to decrease the amount of damage that they do, because the overall amount of damage that you have on Rakan, like, your engage with your W is also your CC, and it's minor. Whereas Braum can stun for a long time. Or like Alistar can combo for a decent amount of time. And then also, you know, uses E to attack him again. So I feel like he just doesn't take away enough damage. And he also doesn't do enough damage. I think Rakan's in a bad spot. Renekton W. Fix the bug, okay. No longer generates Fury. Okay. Bug fix. Bug fix, bug fix. Okay, cool. Q general. Now, next track for lower health bar and only visible to ruin. Okay. And timing around when. So this is just quality of life. Be able to animation cancel Q as well as have both been more consistent. Okay, I have that consistency. Okay. So these are mostly bug fixes, nothing interesting. Sejuani passive, yeah, so passive was a little bit oppressing when you tried to fight Sejuani even at a level advantage. I found that a lot in my games. So 20, 60, 100 at 1, 7, 14, so more manageable. no super amount of flat armor, that you can do all the camps for free, and you can just duel for free. Like a tank should have the burden of being a tank, which means that they should have issues against the damage champions. Okay, cooldown starts once both swings are complete. So this is a bit of a nerf, but it's offset by the like the swing completes in a second, so this is effectively the same. So it's effectively, oh wow, my voice. It's effectively the same except this, and that means her top. I've been seeing Sejuani top and Sejuani jungle, and basically is a minor nerf to those two. Because in the top lane you could trade when you had this, and like they could never take the trade against you. They would never want to take the trade against you when you have 100 armor, right? Why would they? So Sejuani in the top lane gets a little bit of a nerf. You still don't want to trade when they have 20 armor, but in the jungle it's a little bit more manageable because you can auto attack them or whatever, and then back off and then go into them again. So overall, correct nerfs against Sejuani. I feel like this is fairly standard. Sejuani still will be a pick. Seems pretty good. Udyr, mana costs down. Who gives a damn about Udyr, right? Passive. Stalker no longer perish when they move too far away from Yorick. Okay. Quality of life. Last fire kills a unit when Yorick has first grade not be replaced. Okay. So yeah, just distance, quality of life, and then bug fix. Yorick is still a meme. Q damage down. Wow, this is surprising. But okay, so this is what I'm talking about. 2.5 Zack's max health. So Zack is able to get through the jungle or the top lane right now pretty scot-free, right? Because of his passive, you're never going to be in a situation where your laners won't collapse to help you a lot of the time. And you're kind of able to get out of spots or 1v1 other junglers because you can Q them or you can E away or whatever, right? So the problem that most people have complained with Zack is that Zack doesn't have enough damage. Well, here's how he gets his damage, right? Decreasing base is okay, but allowing him to do damage with his max health seems solid. Second hit bonus range increase, okay. Generates a blob, slam radius, bug fix, precise strikes, multitask, okay. E-slingshot, knockup duration increased, and then time to fully charge up. So I guess this is slightly negligible because you can just proc it early, proc it a little bit earlier. Overall, I like this, right? If people are complaining about not enough damage on Zack, this is how he's going to get his damage. This is a buff. This is a slight nerf. But overall, I feel like Zack's in a pretty decent spot with this buff. Seems solid. Ancient coin. Siege regions always drop a coin, okay. Now it behaves like you're one level higher than you actually are, okay. Building out Rejuvenate is a little bit stronger than building out Fairy Charm, and then decreasing gold cost. So this is a bit of a buff, because if you're building, damn, my voice fucking sucks because I have allergies. So if you're building Ancient Coin in the first place, you're probably already conceding the lane to someone that's building Spell Thieves or Relic, so you need a little bit more help. And you get a little bit more help by getting a decreased cost, increased space, and building out Rejuvenate instead of Fairy Charm, because health is more important than mana, because you can control mana a little more. And then no one actually builds this item. But health, buff. Okay, so yeah, like Ancient Coin needed a little bit of help. It's still gonna be worse, like you're still gonna lose to all the Spell Thief builders and all the Relic builders, but a little bit of help. Now grants melee champions 150 bonus attack range. And slightly increased attack speed against minions that can be executed by spells. Oh, so that's actually pretty cool. So now Thresh can actually whip it when he builds face. I think this is a buff that was not needed, but I'll take. Because like you're gonna proc it a lot of time with your AoE spells on Flare or whatever. It was hard to proc sometimes, but I mean this is nice now. Or melee champions. So Braum now gets to proc this at range. It's kind of nice. Killing a minion pauses tribute stacks for 6 seconds per minion slain. So it stacks. So if you hit a minion by accident, like this doesn't actually matter. You shouldn't be hitting a minion. Unless you need to push. Health up, MR down. Health regen 200 to 100. Still occupying the magic resistance slot you want most of the time. Sure. Like, when you leave room for competitors, you have to think about what the competition is. When you think of Adaptive Helm, you're only going to be building against particular champions like Casio, for example, right? So like the other MR health items, like they don't exist. You're just outright nerfing Spirit Visage without giving a better alternative. Adaptive Helm is so situational. You'll build Adaptive Helm over Spirit Visage in certain compositions. But like when you think of the other items, Gargoyles, you're never going to build that all the time because you need health before you build Gargoyles, right? You're not building as a first item. Like Abyssal, no, your job as a tank isn't to decrease the damage that they're taking, really. You can do it, but it's not like you're not full tanking, right? So I don't like this nerf to Spirit Visage. Spirit Visage will still be the first go-to, and this nerf doesn't change it. Okay. Damage dealt to turrets and power drive in, sure. Okay, Rift Herald, Deathcry is now global. Just chat notification pings enemy turret when she's prepared to leap to turret, okay. And Howling Abyss we don't give a damn about. Just a tree line we don't give a damn about. Crowd control. Yep, I like the crowd control name. You can now surrender at 15 minutes with a unanimous team vote. Fuck, it's not gonna be unanimous. This is effectively dead. Only in a minor percentage of situations are you going to unanimously... Like, how are you going to unanimously do a vote? Most people don't vote anyway, and if there's one, then it's not going to go through. Like, the reason why you want to surrender at 15 or surrender at 10 is because you want to open, because you don't want to waste time. But if you're going to open, some people are already AFK anyway, so I guess you have to unanimously for it, but I guess an open that'll finish at 10 is already faster, so it's really whatever. Ping muting. Okay. You can now ping mute, solid. And rotating game mode, lead client. You now start conversations, whatever. Bug fixes, your shop, whatever. Fix that vibe bug. No longer passes through targets. I knew it was passing through targets. I knew it. And yeah, post-fire cannon. Alright, so overall thoughts about the patch. The only relevant things are Timer's going to be strong in the top lane. Heimer's good. Rammus is cucked. Fizz is level 6 is moderated. Graves nerf, so more competitive junglers can get in. Ivern, like, kind of cucked a little bit, but still okay. Lee Sin snowballs less. Lulu change doesn't matter. Cassin change irrelevant. Maokai is still shitty. Rakan is still shitty. Sejuani's still okay. Memes. Sek is good. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed it, feel free to tell me. And this was the patch 7.10 League of Legends patch review.